Okay, welcome. I will ask everyone if you could put yourselves on mute while we have the presentations. It's just easier for everyone to hear. So welcome. My name is Kathy McGady, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Development and Alumni Affairs for Temple's College of Science and Technology. We're so happy that you could join us tonight for Zoom into Scary Science, Creepy Creatures. With Halloween upon us, we wanted to take a closer look at some icky bugs and some scary bats. And I saw some of the slides and the pictures, and they're pretty icky. So our presenters today are Matthew Helmus and Brent Sewall, both assistant professors in our Department of Biology. And they are going to help us get a better look at lanternflies and bats. So Dr. Helmus is an ecologist whose research focuses on evolution, ecology, and global change science. He is investigating the spread and the impact of the spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive species spreading rapidly through Pennsylvania and other parts of the area. The goal of Dr. Sewall's research is to address critical threats to biodiversity and developing effective strategies for conservation. He's especially interested in emerging infectious diseases in wildlife, and particularly understanding the threats to bats by the white nose syndrome disease. We're going to have time for questions after both of the presentations, and I ask everyone to please put their questions in the chat, and when the two presentations are done, we will have time to answer the questions. I also want to just let everyone know we are taping this Zoom session. It will be then on our CST's website, but I just like to let everyone know that we are taping the session. So we are going to begin with the lanternfly. So Matt, are you ready to begin? I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Wait, do I have control? Okay, so hello everyone. So I'm Matt Helmus. I'm a professor in the Department of Biology, and I work on a lot of different things that are ecological. And one of the things that I work a whole lot on right now is the spooky spotted lanternfly. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the spotted lanternfly. For those of us who are in Pennsylvania, I'm sure a lot of us have already seen the spotted lanternfly. But for those of us who are not inside the state, then this is a chance to learn a bit more about them. Let's see. So what is the spotted lanternfly? Well, the spotted lanternfly, that's the species there, Lycorma delicatula. It's an invasive plant hopper from China that was accidentally imported on some landscaping stone into Berks County, which is just outside of Philadelphia. They first found it in 2014. It was probably imported there accidentally, maybe in 2012 or 2013. But first, let's figure out what I mean by the term invasive and what I mean by plant hopper. So invasive species are any plant or animal or pathogen that are alien and whose introduction causes harm. So the virus that's causing the COVID-19 pandemic, that's an invasive species. The lanternfly are invasive species. A lot of the mosquitoes that spread disease to us are invasive species here in the United States. Asian carp, this is in the Illinois River, is an invasive species, and this is kudzu. So these are all examples of species that aren't native to the United States, but have come to the United States and whose introduction actually causes quite a bit of harm. So I'll be talking a lot about spotted lanternfly, but spotted lanternfly is a plant hopper. Now, plant hoppers are these really cool insects. They're found all over the world. If you ever walk across your lawn and little bugs are popping up, like small little bugs, those are probably plant hoppers. Cicadas, where you hear them really loud at nighttime and during the day, those are also plant hoppers. So there's one plant hopper in particular, the spotted lanternfly, that's causing a pretty big problem here in the mid-Atlantic region. Plant hoppers have mouths that, like straws, they suck plant blood called sap. So they stab the phloem, they stab the vascular system of the plant, and they suck out the sap, and that's how they get all of their energy, and that's what they eat. So lanternfly, they, the reason that they are such an invasive species is that they suck the blood of lots of different plant species. So this is the front view of a lanternfly. You can see its mouth part right here, and it's stabbing into that plant, and it's sucking the blood, it's sucking the plant sap out of the plant there. So spotted lanternfly feeds on lots of different plant species, but one of its favorite plants to eat is grape. And so this is here on a grapevine in Pennsylvania, and you can see that huge amount of spotted lanternfly feeding on the grapevine. And we know that grape goes for lots of things, such as raisins. Spotted lanternfly also like fruit trees. Here are a lot of spotted lanternfly feeding on an apple tree in Pennsylvania as well. But what spotted lanternfly likes to eat more than anything is what is called the tree of heaven. And so this is another invasive species. You can see them all over the trunk of these trees here. Whenever there is lots of spotted lanternfly feeding, then you can have large amounts of mold growing. And on tree of heaven, you get this strange white foam that's actually coming out. So it's all very gross stuff. Let's talk a little bit about tree of heaven. So tree of heaven is another invasive species. It was brought here probably 200 years ago. It grows really quick. It was grown in some botanical gardens, and then it was spread by people because it's a tree that grows really quick. So if you cut down all of your trees and you want a tree that grows fast, you could plant a tree of heaven. It was first brought to Philadelphia, but since then it's spread all across the US. It's found in essentially all the states except for some of the Dakotas. Its bark looks like the skin of cantaloupe. That's a good way to identify it. It has really large leaves, but it has leaflets on it. And if you look at the leaflets, they all have these thumbs. If anybody knows what a sumac looks like or a walnut, those two tree species look a lot like tree of heaven, but tree of heaven has the cantaloupe bark and has these thumbs on the leaflets. They produce tons and tons of trees, and this is what a large ailanthus tree looks like here with all these seeds on it. If you cut it down though, it grows right back. And so it's really hard to get rid of. And if you burn it, it actually produces toxic smoke. So it's a pretty bad invasive species. And whenever you have ailanthus in an area, so these are pictures just outside of Philadelphia here. This is in someone's, I believe it's a black cherry tree. You can see children's toys, etc. All of this black mold all around. And then this is actually in Philadelphia. When you have the areas with ailanthus trees in it, these spotted lanternfly populations can get to be humongous, and they're found then crawling up buildings and crawling up other trees, etc. They poop whenever they drink the sap. So they drink the sap, and then they then have to poop. And when they poop, they can poop all over stairs, they can poop all over cars, and then that poop can actually mold as well. So all very gross stuff. Okay, so I've told you a lot about spotted lanternfly. Now the question is, well, what can you do about spotted lanternfly? Well, first you can learn about spotted lanternfly. And this is just a very short presentation. I've only given you a few items, but you can look up spotted lanternfly on the Penn State Extension website or on the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture website. There's also a lot of other sources of good information about spotted lanternfly. If you're a homeowner, you should try and remove tree of heaven. You should find a tree specialist to take care of that problem for you. Or again, go to the Penn State Extension website or the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and find out how you can remove tree of heaven safely. You can squish, you can trap spotted lanternfly when you see them. Right now is the time when egg masses are being laid and have already been laid, and so you can scrape them. I'll talk about that here in a second. You can always check your vehicle or anything you keep outside for spotted lanternfly if you're going to move it. Spotted lanternfly has a cycle, and right about now is when their eggs are laying, and soon all the spotted lanternfly will die whenever it gets a bit too cold. And so these eggs will overwinter, turn into nymphs, and then grow into all of these adults that I was showing you pictures of. A lot of people will use duct tape. Should you use duct tape? Because these lanternfly crawl up trees. The answer is yeah, it is a good idea for early instars. It catches them pretty well. It doesn't catch a whole lot of birds or other things, but as they start to get larger, that duct tape becomes ineffective. So a lot of people have been using what's termed sticky bands, which is just this fly paper that they stick around trees. Now, that fly paper can catch a lot of lanternfly, but it can also catch small mammals, birds. This, I believe, is a wren. These, some of these are spotted lanternfly, but a lot of these are native insects. So you really should, if you're using them, put chicken wire or some sort of plastic covering over that sticky band to not catch any birds. And new studies have come out where people are developing circle traps like these that are really good at catching lanternfly and don't catch your birds or don't catch a lot of other native insects. And then on TikTok and on Twitter, there are people going out and trying to catch spotted lanternfly in bottles. And so if you have a bottle, you can actually put one right up there and they hop right into it. And so a lot of people are catching spotted lanternfly with bottles, which you could throw in your freezer and then just let them decompose in your backyard somewhere. The eggs, they look a lot just like muds. So right now you should be seeing those. And so if you see eggs like this, you're going to want to scrape them, put them in a baggie, maybe put them in a baggie with a bit of ethanol. You can double bag it as well, and then you can go ahead and toss them and throw them away. As long as they've been submerged in ethanol, they should have all died. So why am I talking about spotted lanternfly? Well, I, along with some of my colleagues, are performing some research on spotted lanternfly at Temple University. We're doing a lot of modeling and data science. So just like a weather forecaster will try to tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen in the future, we're also trying to figure out where lanternfly might spread to next. So we're trying to do forecasting. We're developing some applications and using data science to try and predict where it is, both within the area where it's found here, but also across the United States as well. Great, well, thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Matt. That was really interesting. I could have used you a couple weeks ago. I had a tree in my yard that we just had cut down earlier this week, which our landscaper referred to as a lanternfly tree. So I should have called you first, but thank you. So now we're going to move on to bats, and Brett, you're up.
All right, well, thank you so much. Looking forward to telling you a little bit about some creatures that fly around in the night. Everybody knows that bats are spooky, right? You wouldn't have a Halloween picture, it wouldn't be complete if there weren't a few bats in it. And everyone knows that vampires can turn into bats and fly away, right? Well, that's all pretend, but there really are 3 vampire bats that don't live anywhere near Pennsylvania, but do like to suck a little blood from birds or mammals. But mostly bats are harmless to people and quite cute, I think. Here's Mariana flying fox on the left. Has these big eyes so they can see really well at night and find their fruit that they want to eat for food. And on the right-hand side is the Honduran white bat. They like to live underneath large leaves like banana leaves. And their white color reflects the color of the leaves onto them, so they look green and blend right in. Overall, there are 1,419 species that are known. And bats range in size from the bumblebee bat, which weighs less than a penny, to this giant golden crowned flying fox, which can weigh 3 pounds and have a wingspan of 5.5 feet. You'll notice the big ears on the spotted bat on the top right. It has the biggest ears of any North American bat. These bats have big ears to hear echoes from their sonar, which lets them move around, find insects, and move around in caves, even in complete darkness. And then on the left is the pallid bat. It hears so well, it can hear little arthropods, like this scorpion, crawling around on the ground, even without using its sonar. And then it lands on the ground, grabs the scorpion, and jumps up and flies away. Bats are very important for nature, too. You might not know that some bats like to eat fruit, like this bat here on the left, the Tongan fruit bat. It's eating fig fruits, and then when it flies away, it'll eat those. It'll poop them out, poop out the seeds, and in this way, it's planting new trees all over the forest. And on the right is the Mexican long-tongued bat. It's a vital pollinator in desert ecosystems. They have long bristle-like tongue, allowing them to sip nectar from agave and cactus. And the one on the top right is another type of long-nosed bat, the lesser long-nosed bat. It's not normally yellow. It's just been pollinating so many plants, it's all covered with pollen after a busy night of drinking nectar. So it will visit one plant and then travel to another, passing the pollen with it and allowing the plant to produce new fruit and seeds. Bats are really important in other ways too. All the bats that live near us are insect-eating bats or arthropod-eating bats. They fly and they catch bats, or the bats fly and they catch insects either while they're flying or on leaves. They also eat many insect pests that attack crops. And in this way, the bats increase the yields of those for the farmers, and they enable lower pesticide use because those pests are not attacking the crops as much. In Pennsylvania, bats save farmers about $300 million a year, or about 16% of the market value of their harvest. And we know that they contribute billions of dollars to the national economy as well. Bats are also threatened. They are facing a loss of their foraging habitat, the area where they feed, a loss and disturbance of the roosting habitat, which is where they sleep or hibernate. They suffer from in-flight collisions with cars, buildings, and wind turbines. When they eat bugs that have been eating crops that have been treated with pesticides, they can get their pesticides and other toxins into their systems as well, and that can be harmful. In some places in the world, especially where there are bigger bats, they're subject to hunting. In many places around the world, they're subject to persecution. People don't like them, so they want to get rid of them. They suffer from climate change and also disease as well. So many species have now become more and more endangered, like this Livingston's flying fox, which is now considered to be critically endangered. Many bats are affected by white nose syndrome, and this is something that we study pretty intensively in my lab. Just like the spotted lanternfly is an invasive species, the fungus that causes this disease is also an invasive species. It's brought over from somewhere in Europe or Asia, brought to North America somewhere before 2006. It was detected first in New York near Albany. And it's very seemingly innocuous. If you look at the muzzle of a bat, has a little bit of a white growth growing on it. And that doesn't seem to be too bad. But eventually that fungus grows onto the wings, and all the golden colored spots on this bat's wings represent lesions. These are damaged areas of the wing that have been attacked by the fungus. And ultimately, if the damage gets so bad, the bats start waking up from hibernation again and again and again during winter, and they lose all their energy and they're not able to survive. Unfortunately, the fungus that causes the disease has been spreading. This is the point of origin that was first detected around Albany in New York. And the cooler colors are where it first started appearing. We first got it in Pennsylvania around 2009. But then in more recent years, getting into the green colors, you see it spread further out, yellow, and eventually it's even reached the West Coast. So right now, white nose syndrome has been found in 35 states and 7 Canadian provinces, plus 4 more states where the fungus itself has been detected, although in those states the disease has not been detected yet. So in my lab, we're studying how white nose syndrome affects bats. We're trying to understand which species are affected and to what extent. So far, between our work and those of many other labs, it's been determined that 12 bat species are affected by white nose syndrome in North America, and these species all are suffering negative effects of one kind or another. And in particular, we've documented large-scale declines in several bat species. One of those is the little brown bat, and this is a very small bat, lives up to its name. It's only weighs about 3 pennies worth. It's about 2 inches long and has a 6-inch wingspan. And population trends for this bat across the eastern United States suggest a sharp downward trend in recent years. So we're also studying ways that we might protect bats. We are looking at ways that can limit disturbance, such as creating bat-friendly gates on the outside of caves and mines where the bats hibernate during the winter. We're doing construction in some places and other efforts to control internal microclimates to make them a little bit colder, which is more suitable for bats and also reduces the growth of the fungus that causes the disease. And we're also trying to attack the pathogen when the bats are absent to reduce the reservoir of the fungal pathogen so it doesn't attack the bats when they come back into hibernation. And then finally, we're advising state and national efforts to conserve bats. So you might be asking, how can I help bats? There's a lot of ways. First of all, you can enjoy bats. You can go out and see them after sunset in the summer. Just look up toward the sky. Protect or install native plants. Trees and small plants help produce lots of insects, and they do that much better than invasive plants do. So plant native plants, and that will help bats. Protect streams and wetlands, which are also important for insects that bats eat. You could build a bat box for your yard, or keep up a snag, which is a dead standing tree. If you can leave it up safely, that could become a home for a bat. Then during the winter months, when bats are hibernating, try to stay out of caves and mines where the bats might be. And if you do go from visiting caves or mines, then please carefully clean your gear, boots, and clothes after visiting and before you go to another one, so you don't spread the fungus from one spot to another. And then if bats get into places that you don't want them, maybe your attic or somewhere else, there are best practices in place. You can look those up to figure out how to remove them humanely without causing any harm to the bats and getting them out of where you need them from. And most of all, this is the most important one, is learn about bats and teach others about them. Really interesting creatures. So here's just a few links if you want to learn more. And I think that's all that I have for today.
Okay, thanks so much, Brent. So I can see from our chat box that we have several questions. So I was going to start at the top, but there is one obvious question. So I thought maybe we'd start with that. And that is, do bats eat lanternflies? It seemed like the perfect tie-in.
That is a great
I'll let you two fight it out.
I have not heard that they do that. One issue is that the spotted lanternflies, I think, are, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're very active during the daytime, and the bats are active at night around here. But that would certainly be a big help if they were able to eat those insects. Help us out in both regards.
Yeah, we do have evidence of we have one photograph from one person who tweeted about it, and there was a bat that ate a spotted lanternfly, and it was during that dusk period where there was still some flying and the bats were just starting. But yeah, I don't think bats will do much damage to lanternfly populations.
So one of the next questions is, why does the feeding on the tree of heaven result in the mold growing around the base?
Yeah, so it's not just tree of heaven, it's any of the trees, it's also grapes. Anytime that they're feeding on sap is really sugary, and their poop then is really sugary. And so then, especially during the summer months, it's really warm, and you have all this sugary poop everywhere, and that molds really, really quickly.
And another question on the lanternflies, Matt, is what's the impact been on the agricultural industries like vineyards, apple orchards, etc.?
Yeah, so the vineyards have been hit quite badly. Some have seen 90% declines in their grape yield, vine death, especially when it's a cold winter. So if lanternfly are feeding on vines and it's a really cold winter, you actually have a lot more vines dying. And there has been at least one case of possible closure as well. So the vineyards have been hit pretty hard. That picture of apple that I showed you, that does happen, but that industry hasn't been as hard hit. And then some of the lumber industries are also starting to get hit as well.
So are there any hopeful pesticides that are safe and effective? And are there any natural predators for lanternflies?
Yeah, so for pesticides, there are different pesticides that are in use. You can go to the Penn State Extension website, see if you're okay with using any of those pesticides. These pesticides are general pesticides, so they're going to kill lots of other bugs besides just the lanternfly. So think about that before you use them. There are scientists who are working on more specific targeted lanternfly pesticides, and those are derived from fungus.
So Brent, can you tell us what kind of bats live in PA?
Yes, so one of them I showed you a picture of, the little brown bat. Those are the really small ones that weigh just 3 pennies. And there's also big brown bats. And when I say big, I'm not talking really big, but maybe a wingspan of about that big. When they fold their wings up, they're really looking like a little guy, but they're still much bigger than our little browns. We have tricolored bats. These are bats that they're called tricolors because their hair has 3 different colors on them. There's eastern small-footed bats, and these are guys that like to live in talus slopes. So these are like rocks that are like rock piles and rock walls and slopes like that. We have northern long-eared bats, which are very, as the name suggests, really long ears, and Indiana bats. Both these species are some of our most endangered bats that we have in Pennsylvania. And then we have a red bat, which is a really beautiful bat. You can actually tell what species it is as it flies through underneath like a street lamp at night, because you can actually see the red color when it flies over. It's very beautiful red color. And then 2 bats that are more of a silvery color, silver-haired bats and hoary bats. And those are the 9 species that are usually found here. We have some other ones that are occasionally found here in Pennsylvania.
So how large are bat colonies?
Well, that depends on whether you mean now or 10 years ago. Prior to white nose syndrome, you could find bats within Pennsylvania more than 100,000 in a single cave or mine. Now you're lucky to find a few hundred at most. In many cases, we're just down to a handful of bats left. So it really is a cause of the white nose syndrome primarily that's led to these declines in bats. It's really led to millions of bats dying from this disease. But not all species are affected, and there are some species that live in areas that haven't been affected. So you can find in the southwestern United States, in places like Texas, there are large colonies of Mexican free-tailed bats, and these can live in colonies of millions of bats. And the largest colony known is 20 million bats within a single cave. Bracken Cave in Texas has that enormous colony.
Wow. So Matt, we have another lanternfly question. Can you use the tree of heaven? Can that be used as a bait tree? Maybe right smack in the middle of your yard.
That is a great thought, and yes, the answer is absolutely yes. The USDA and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, what they like to do are call these trees trap trees, where they'll clean out all the ailanthus in one area, but just leave one really big one, and then at the time when, let me remember, at the time just before they want to lay their eggs, just before they mate, they congregate on Tree of Heaven, and that's when then the USDA and the State Department of Agriculture will inject a insecticide into the Tree of Heaven, and that only kills the spotted lanternfly. And so that's a very targeted way to kill spotted lanternfly. So they're doing that quite a bit.
Okay. So Brent, another bat question. Excuse me. Is there a safe place to go see bats around the Philadelphia area?
Maybe your backyard. They fly around. Maybe there's less in the way of numbers these days, but they fly around quite a bit in the summer months. If you go outside a little bit after sunset and look up towards the sky, oftentimes, and you might need to be a little patient, wait a few minutes, but look up towards the sky and you can see them silhouetted against the sky as they fly around. Another great option is to go to near some streetlights. If you walk around in the evening, look up at streetlights, because they often will find that little moths and other things will be attracted to those streetlights, and then they'll come swooping in there. And I often see them, if I go on a walk in the evening, I often see red bats and other bats swooping back and forth underneath streetlights, hawking these insects and gobbling them up wherever they can find them.
Is there any place outside Philadelphia where you can see them at a safe distance?
Well, these are, I mean, they're available everywhere, and anywhere you want to look, really.
Okay.
In the evenings. You can also, there's some commercial caves that you can go to that have these. Like Mammoth Cave is a famous one, but that's farther away. One that's in central Pennsylvania is Woodward Cave. It's a commercial cave. You can go and visit there. So there are some places like that, but I would say, you know, try and go just into your backyard or walk down the street. There's also, outside of the pandemic, I usually lead a little outreach event at the Woodlands each summer, and we go on a bat walk and take a look up in the sky and find them there.
So here's a question a lot of people wonder about their own yards. Where's the best place to put a bat box or a bat house? Yeah, so if you look on Bat Conservation International's website, you'll find they have a bat box handbook, so you can find everything you want to know about it. But just for a quick answer, they do like it hot, so someplace where it's sunny and up high away from predators. So somewhere where a cat can't climb up very easily, or a squirrel or something to get into those boxes. If it's on a large pole or up on the top of a side of a house, or up in a large tree, those are all good places. If you have the ability to put two boxes up, one in a more shady area and one in a more sunny area, then they sometimes like that because they can move back and forth as the temperature shifts. Okay, and Matt, we have a question about the lanternflies. Are they beginning to lay their eggs now?
Yes, they've been laying their eggs for about 2 months now. And my guess is when it starts to get down to about 30 or so, I think it's supposed to be maybe 34 or so, that's when a lot of the adults will start dying and they'll stop laying their eggs. But yes, you should be seeing a lot of egg laying right now, especially if you're in Philadelphia, where it's usually a bit warmer, so they've actually have been laying eggs for a lot longer.
Okay, and Brent, we have another bat question. How far will a bat travel to hibernate? Some of them, it depends on the species. So some will travel, you know, a few miles. There are some species that will travel tens of miles or hundreds of miles even. But there's also, they're basically looking for the best places to hibernate. They're trying to find those spots that are really cold and but then don't go below freezing and have very stable temperatures. So those are not easy to find, and so they will travel quite a distance sometimes, as I mentioned, sometimes hundreds of miles to find the right spot. Having said that, there's also another group of bats. About 3 of the 9 species that we have here in Pennsylvania are migratory bats. So they actually don't go to hibernate. Instead, they travel south like birds do. So they're going to be traveling from Pennsylvania, maybe down to Georgia, and then come back up here in the following spring. So they're going to be traveling maybe thousands of miles. Okay. And Matt, can you remind us what the lanternfly eggs look like so we know what to look for?
Sure, yeah, I definitely suggest searching lanternfly eggs in your search engine and finding lots of pictures of those. Right now, they're going to be maybe like the size of your thumb, gray and a little bit shiny, and they almost look like mud, or even when they start to get older, they look like lichen, sort of just a gray patch that's on a stone or a fence, or sometimes a train car. So definitely just take a look online and you'll be able to see them.
Okay. Well, I think that's the end of the questions that we have in chat tonight. So I just wanted to say thank you to our presenters. It was great to see some bugs and bats right before Halloween. And I wanted to thank everybody on the call today for joining us. The College of Science and Technology will continue to offer Zoom into science sessions throughout the year. And we post them on our website as well as on social media. So please stay tuned for the ones that we schedule in the months to come. And we thank you for joining us again, and give everybody from our Temple family a big shout out. Hello, and thanks for joining us. Good night.